Hi, hello, and welcome. My name is Stephanie Poole. I am the founder of Birth Prep Academy, where we help pregnant women prepare for their very first hospital birth. Y'all, today we are going to be talking about three common misconceptions about breastfeeding. And I'm excited to jump into that with you today. But before I do, I just want to let you know that at the end of this episode, I'll be going over the offer for Black Friday. So I will be hosting a Black Friday sale. It is coming up next week. If you want to know how to get the very best discount at an exclusive opportunity to be able to shop first, then you definitely want to stay tuned to the end because I'm going to get into all of that a little bit later. All right. So the very first I want to jump into the three common misconceptions, right? Because there's some things about breastfeeding that I feel like come up a lot, either with clients or just what I see, on the internet and things like that. And I feel like, I really want to kind of put the stake in the sand and bring some truth to the situation so that we can really move forward with more clients learning. And I have to say this about whenever I teach on breastfeeding. So in case you're new to Birth Prep Academy, we have three core pillars that we teach to our first time moms. And that is childbirth, birth prep, and breastfeeding. Those three. And I'm always so passionate whenever I teach about each one. Today it happens to be breastfeeding. And I think breastfeeding, I don't know, the last few times I've taught about it, it kind of etches out in front of the others. And as I say that, like I literally feel torn on the inside. What is wrong with me? It's like I literally feel torn because I love them all so much, and I see the need for lessons to be learned in every area of it. But for today's conversation, we're talking exclusively about breastfeeding and common misconceptions. So let's jump right into the first one. The very first common misconception that I hear a lot is that breastfeeding is easy. And the thing about that misconception is that I firmly believe that it is not easy, that it is simple. And there's a difference. There's a difference between something being easy and something being simple, right? And I actually have it pulled up on my screen here. What is simple? Simple is easily understood or done. Simple is plain or basic and uncomplicated in form. That is what breastfeeding is, but it is by no means easy. And that, my friend, is the trick. Or as Kiki Palmer says, she often says, the gag is, that is the gag, my friend. The gag is that it is not easy. It is simple. There is a difference. Easy implies that there's no work to be done, that you could just jump in, that you could just do it without any kind of learning curve. And I am here to tell you that is not true. It is, in fact, one of the number one reasons why people fail at breastfeeding. And it's because they have this ideology that it's easy. And then they jump in, okay? And then like it gets tough and most people quit because they just aren't really positioned to accept that it's going to take work. And so when it does, it gets to be, quite overwhelming for most people. And so that is definitely the number one misconception, is that breastfeeding is easy. And I'm here to tell you it is very simple. It is the process, the understanding of it is not complicated, but you do have to have an understanding and a guidance about the process so that you can implement the simple, you know, formula it takes to successfully breastfeed. So the number one misconception is breastfeeding is easy, and I'm here to tell you, it is not easy. It is simple. Okay. Moving on to misconception number 2, which is breastfeeding hurts. And I feel like this misconception is kind of tied into that very first one we talked about it being easy. I think what I've seen is that people will jump into breastfeeding without any point of reference, any guidance, any learning or education about what breastfeeding is and how it is meant to take place. And so when you jump in like that, right, what happens is you're often going to, like with anything, kind of bump up against a wall because you don't know. So it's kind of like this trial and error type situation. And the thing about it being trial and error is most people are not willing to go through that rough part to get to the reward of breastfeeding, because they say that it hurts. And the hurt comes from not knowing, not having the proper education on how to implement this simple system, right? So it's a misconception that breastfeeding hurt. It does not have to hurt. If you understand, if you learn, if you have guidance, right, on how to implement a very simple process like breastfeeding, then you will find that when it does hurt, you know how to troubleshoot to get back on track with it. But breastfeeding, and it, when done properly, does not hurt. Does not hurt. Instead, we hear all of the horror stories, right, about how, you know, people suffer with cracked nipples or even bleeding and things like that. And it all comes down to, you know, having a proper latch and making sure that, you know, there's not any interference with the way the baby is able to attach to the breast. But if you don't know that, because it's your first time, then you kind of get stuck in this rut, or you hear, right, from women who've been in this position, and then now you have this, you know, idea that breastfeeding hurts. It does not hurt. It does not hurt. Now there are, you know, of course, times when the baby is trying to learn, you know, or they're using the breast as a pacifier, and they may, you know, grab on a little tight or whatnot. You know, that listen, it's a contact sport, okay? So you may have a few of those instances, but generally speaking, breastfeeding is not something that is meant to be hurtful. So that is misconception number 2. Now, the third misconception, this is the final misconception, is that mothers really can't make enough milk anyway. So a lot of people kind of shy away from practicing breastfeeding because they're worried about making enough milk. And the reality of it is the overwhelming majority of women who practice breastfeeding make plenty of milk for their babies. You got to remember, breastfeeding is practiced all throughout the world, globally, and it has been for thousands of years. So something that consistent, something that has taken place for so long across so many different demographics and cultures, it's proven it works. Women are providing more than enough nutrition for their babies, more than enough milk. But it's a misconception that, you know, we hear a lot. Well, I don't know if I'm going to be making, you know, enough milk, so I'll just go with what I can see with formula. And while I don't think that there's, anything wrong with parents who have to feed their babies with formula, I am of the opinion that breast milk and breastfeeding is the optimal nutrition source for your baby. Research says so. Evidence says so. We know this. This is not just my opinion. It is facts. This is the best way that you could possibly feed your baby, as well as get plenty of benefits for yourself. Now, I kind of feel like this is important to understand about breastfeeding as well. There's 3 components that will help you to be successful when you're breastfeeding. Number 1 is getting a good, proper latch. That is number 1. Number 2 is the frequency of your breastfeeding. How often are you breastfeeding? How often are you removing, the baby's milk from the breast? How well is the baby removing that milk? And if the baby is not removing the milk, then you should be expressing that in some way. Those are the 3 main factors for being successful in breastfeeding, for making a good milk supply. And so if those 3 components are there, you don't have to worry about if you're producing enough milk for your baby. Again, if you have a good latch, if you are frequently offering your breast to the baby, and during those feedings, your baby is removing the milk from your breast. If your baby is not removing the milk at the feeding, you should be removing the milk through expression, either with a machine, a pump, or hand expression. And if those 3 things are present, you are undeniably making enough milk for your baby. Okay, so that is definitely a misconception. So far we have that breastfeeding is easy. It is not easy. It is simple. You can do it, but there is going to take some work to do it. Breastfeeding hurts is another misconception. While it, takes a learning curve to learn how to do it, when implemented right, breastfeeding should not hurt. You should not have cracked nipples. You should not have bleeding nipples. When you actually implement breastfeeding appropriately, it should not hurt. And the last thing, am I making enough milk supply? If you have those 3 components that I just talked about, you will be making enough milk for your baby. Now, most people will ask, well, what is, if you have to give advice about how to be successful, what is it? And my number 1 thing that I wish I could tell more first-time moms, because this is something that I didn't know myself, is that it really needs to start from birth. Is it possible to go back after, the baby has been born, after you've been discharged from the hospital, after you're home for a couple weeks, and then start breastfeeding? Yes. That's the short answer. Is it the best way to do it? No. The best way to start to get the strongest milk supply is to start from birth. But the only way that you could start from birth is by having knowledge before you give birth, so you know what to do to optimize what we call that miracle hour. The very first hour that your baby is born is one of the most coveted moments for starting a healthy breastfeeding journey. And the only way to do that is to know before you give birth that, hey, once I give birth, I want to put the baby to breast. I want to start breastfeeding. And I've spoken about this on, one of my other lives when I talked about breastfeeding. One of the misconceptions that I had, so this is a bonus, right? Because it's not really here in my notes, but it popped in my head. So I feel like I need to say it, which is, I was under the impression, especially if you are giving birth in a hospital, that the nurses are going to teach you how to breastfeed. And the response, the truth of it is, they are capable of doing it. They're trained, they're certified to teach you how to breastfeed. But the caveat is oftentimes you are not the only patient, and nurses work in shifts. So it depends on when you give birth, how much time they will have to actually take you through the full breastfeeding tutorial on how to do it and get you acclimated to it. And even then, you go through it so fast, you don't have time to really digest it, right? And so what you're left with is exactly what I was left with, trying to figure it out on my own. The best way to do it, and this is what I recommend for anyone that's going to be giving birth in a hospital, is for you to learn, right, before giving birth on your own, to have a point of reference of what to do, how breastfeeding works. And then when you get to the hospital and you give birth, those nurses and the staff there are able to supplement that learning. So you're not learning from scratch. I did it. It's almost impossible to do because you're trying to learn the baby and the feeding habits. You're trying to recover at the same time, right? So that was one of the biggest problems I ran into, was trying to learn everything right as I gave birth, because I didn't have anyone to teach me, because I didn't know before I gave birth. So one of the biggest things that I always say, and I've said this time and time again, is even if you don't learn from me, find a trusted resource and get the information so that you can implement it. It makes a difference on whether or not you are able to have a positive birth experience. You don't want to, I often look back at that version of myself before I knew, and I'm like, girl, like, like what was going on? I did not know. I did not know. And so I am really petitioning you here to say to you, get the help. Definitely learn about childbirth or breastfeeding before you have to give birth, so that you can get additional help and additional guidance, but you have a point of reference to start from. Okay? Now, with that being said, I did mention that we will be having a Black Friday sale. So I just wanted to reiterate that wherever you're watching this, or if you're listening to the podcast, it will be in the show notes. If you're on YouTube, it is in the description. If you are on Instagram, it is in the link in bio. And that is the Black Friday waitlist. Y'all, go sign up. It is the best way to shop with me on Black Friday, because you will get exclusive information. Anyone that is on that wait list it's in again, the description if you're watching on YouTube. If you are on Instagram, hello, by the way, you can check the link in bio. Sign up for the Black Friday waitlist. You will be able to sign up for my program, Teach Me How to Breastfeed. And it will walk you through exactly what to do from the moment you give birth and beyond, to get you off to a great breastfeeding start. It is what I wish I had when I myself gave birth years ago. It is what I wish I had. And so make sure that you are on that wait list so that you will get the notification of when you can shop. Everyone on the list will get first dibs to sign up at the greatest discount. So it will be open to the public, but you will get the greatest discount. And if you're already on my list, don't worry, I got you. I'm going to take care of you. So with that being said, oh, great. Hello and welcome. I'm so happy to have you. So with that being said, If you have any further questions, remember, I always am excited to continue the conversation in my DMs. So make sure to send a hello or any questions that you might have. Again, I always teach on childbirth, birth prep, and breastfeeding. So if you have any questions regarding that, be sure to reach out. I'm always excited to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining me. And until next time, happy birthday. Bye, guys.